Hey guys, it's Melissa Morrow with Vintage Bee Design, and today I am having a fun day at the shop working on some projects. I did not get as much done this weekend as I was hoping. I mean, it is only Saturday, but tomorrow I have the fun of cleaning up my craft room. I'll probably do a little video on that, but boy, oh boy, is it a mess, and we're having some work done at the house, so I have no choice but to get that done tomorrow. So I needed to get some stuff done today. So I'm sorry I couldn't take you with me on the live. Apparently I don't have enough cell phone reception in the store. So I will do this as a recorded video. I will flip it around and let's see what we can find. I wanted to keep my live narration in this thrift flip video, but unfortunately the music was just so loud. And I'm pretty sure that all of Aerosmith's music will end up with a copyright strike. I really was looking for stuff for my staging company and maybe a few Easter decor items that I could put in the booth, and the basket wasn't doing it. This little bunny is adorable though. It is so cute, and I love that it doesn't need anything. It doesn't have a price tag though, so I'll have to ask what I can get this bunny for. And I always seem to forget when I walk in to look and see what's 40% off. It is all red tags, so that is definitely stuff I'm going to be looking for. This copper bucket is perfect for staging. I've already started a copper collection for one of my Airbnbs. Maybe at some point I'll be desperate enough to want to paint all these little figurines, but for now I have plenty of other things to paint. I am happy I found a couple of items for staging. We desperately need them. I love this little bunny too, and at $1.99, I don't feel like I'd really lose on this proposition. I love the bright springy colors, so it's another piece I don't think I have to do very much with. There's always so much clear glass. I really need to figure out something I can do with it, because man, can you find a lot of it, and it's cheap. So here's a good look at all the non-staging items I was able to purchase, and I am going to use some DIY paint and my Klingon brush to give them all a fresh fix-up. Green is the hot color for spring, so I'm going with DIY's Aviary. And here's a quick look at what I paid for everything that I purchased. I thought I had the camera rolling when I started painting this cute little bunny, but apparently not. In either case, all you really do is dip your brush into the DIY paint and start painting. Because I do want a little bit of texture on here, I am making a little bit thicker coat, and then I need to let it dry thoroughly on all of these pieces before moving on. And can someone tell me why I keep forgetting to grab my turntable when I'm painting these? It's so much easier when you're using a Lazy Susan. At some point, I'm going to have to remember that when I'm painting. When using straight up DIY on something as slick as this cake plate, I like to actually sort of smoosh, dab my paint on instead of painting with a sweeping motion. And the reason is it tends to stick a little bit better. You're not pulling it off with your strokes. That method is less important on the first coat, but becomes very important on the second coat. And as you see me applying the second coat here, you'll see what I mean. It's just easier to sort of pounce or smoosh than it is to wipe. Otherwise, I find that because DIY paint activates again when it's wet, that I have a tendency to pull the paint off when I use a typical brush stroke as opposed to a patting or dabbing or a smooshing motion. Seriously, did I not learn to get my Lazy Susan after doing the first coat? No, I didn't. I struggled the whole way through. And I'm leaving in this footage of me using the heat gun because I want you to see that when DIY paint dries, it dries a little bit of a different color, often a lot lighter. Then when you add a top coat or wax, it tends to go to that original color. And here I am ready with my white wax. I am just dabbing it on with a large stencil brush. I think this is the JRV 1.5 inch brush or the number 27. And I am applying it liberally. Now, if I wanted a lot more control of the white wax, I would have applied a clear wax first. But in this case, I actually really want to tone down some of that green and make it a little bit softer for spring. I like the depth of the color. I like the richness of it, but I want it to be soft and creamy for springtime. So I'm just going to apply, make sure it gets in all the nooks and crannies, and then I am going to wipe it back. Now, I'm a little heavy-handed in this process, so I have a tendency to actually pull off and basically do a wet distress while I'm waxing. Plus, I'm going to be honest and say I never let it dry overnight. I'm pretty much always in a hurry when I'm painting, so I'm heat gunning it and it hasn't fully set. So sometimes if I really don't want to see what's underneath, then I will go ahead and spray one light coat of polyacrylic, and that will ensure that it does not chip off between layers. And I am going to repeat this process for all of my pieces. I do really enjoy using the DIY paint on these ceramic pieces and then using the wax over it, either white wax or dark wax, or as you've seen recently, a lot of decrepit dust. I think it gives so much character. And as long as the shape of the item, the bones of the item are good, then you can come up with some really great pieces. It doesn't really matter what they look like when you buy them. So here is a look at the afters. I did plant some little florals in the back of this little ducky, and I think it came out so cute. I don't mind that I heavily distressed when I was waxing this. I think it adds to the vintage look of it. This little bunny is maybe my favorite thing that I did with this grouping. I love the finial and I love the little rabbits that I didn't have to do anything to, but come on, that bunny is just so cute with that little scarf shawl thing. I love them. I kind of want to keep them, but I'm selling them. So you can, if you like them, check them out on our website, vintagebedesign.com. And then of course there was chairs I found on the side of the road while I was staging this week. I had to do something with them. Okay, I was staging that house, and as I loaded up my truck, I saw this on the curb. Who sees what I see? Yep, it's gonna get loaded. And while I didn't get as much done with these as I would have liked to, the big accomplishment was probably just getting them all taken apart and getting all the spindles and then throwing away the broken bits. And really, any day I get to use my compound miter saw, it's a good day. But I've got this whole box of spindles and all of these ideas. I was hoping to get some time in the workshop this weekend, but I guess I'll have to say that for another week. Because I did want to get at least one project done in this video using the spindles, I asked my husband if he would mind cutting out some sort of, I look at them like little mini pizza boards, little mini pizza paddles, out of scrap wood that we had. I drew out the pattern that I wanted, and then he took it on the bandsaw and cut these out for me. He took this image to showcase the fact that when you cut things out, you cut on the outside of the line, and then you can sand down to the line. It's better than cutting on the line because what often will happen is you'll end up cutting inside the line. So cut outside the line and then use a belt sander to actually create your line and smooth everything out, which is what he did on all of these for me. And then he got to play with the new toy. So jealous. So basically this is a drum sander, and he is pushing it through at variable speeds and adjusting the height so that it gives a perfect sand across it every time. You just put it in and it pushes it through and it sands the entire face. He also drilled holes so my spindles would fit as handles. And like the great husband he is, he even brought them up to the shop so I could get them done. I am going to use Dixie Belle's Voodoo Gel Stain, and this is because I really hate typical stain. This is water-based, so all I have to do is basically paint it on. It works exactly like paint. You can wipe it down if you want to have a lighter look, but I'm using this full strength, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this Voodoo Gel Stain to paint my entire boards. I love the deep, rich brown of this product. Next up, I am going to use my JRV brushes and I am going to stencil using some of the JRV mini stencils. I will list the products that I'm using in the description below so that if you are interested in any of them, you'll know exactly where to find them and what I'm using. I'm going to be using my drop shadow technique that I like. And basically I add the black first. In this case, I am using Fusion's Coal Black for a base, and it's really nice because it has a built-in top coat. Since I'm going to put white over this, I don't have to seal in between, which you do need to do sometimes. Unless you have a top coat between them, sometimes you'll end up with gray instead of a crisp white and a crisp black. One of my favorite things about the drop shadow technique is, one, it's really fast and easy, but really the main thing is that it makes the white really pop. Sometimes I find if I'm just doing the straight up white, it doesn't have as good of a presence on the board. The drop shadow really gives it a nice pop. When doing this technique, it's also very important that you clean your stencils between paint layers and that you get a fresh stencil brush. You do not want to use a wet stencil brush. I guarantee everything will bleed. And when I was talking about that pop, look how faded the black looks initially, and then we add the white, and with that black underneath of it, it really has an amazing pop. If you feel like any area doesn't have full enough coverage, then all you need to do is put your stencil right back down and line it up, and you will have a perfect stencil. Next up, it's time for me to paint these tiny little spindles. So I am using Fusion's Limestone, which is the same white that I used for stenciling. While my spindles are drying, I give all three boards a nice light sanding with kind of a worn out 220 grit. Honestly, I probably should have gotten new sandpaper, but this is what I use, 220 grit, and that just makes everything smooth. It takes away any grittiness from the stencil, and I like the edges just sort of roughed up a little bit. Once my spindles have each had at least 2 coats of paint, then I'm going to go ahead and sand them with a 60 grit sandpaper. I want some really good distressing here. I'm going to add some wood glue inside the holes and on the tip of the spindles, and then I am just going to work them into place. Off camera, I did actually decide to hammer them in to make sure they were nice and tight. And just to make them a little more rustic, I'm using Dixie Belle's Best Staying Wax in brown, and I'm going to get into all those little grooves and crevices. I'm going to go ahead and give the board wax as well. I'm going to do all the sides, so the sides, the top, and the back of it. I want to make sure that this has a really nice finish. Just check out the difference between the dark wax and the not dark wax, and look at how yummy and worn that dark wax looks. I decided I wanted a beaded tassel for my boards, so I'm taking some jute and wrapping it around the 4 fingers of my hand about 15 to 20 times, and then I will cut that off. Before I did that step, I cut another piece of jute, probably about 12 to 14 inches long, and that I am just inserting sort of through the loops there, and I'm going to tie that to make sure that it will hold the top of these loops when I cut the bottom of them. Next up, I'm going to wrap some jute around the top of it, and once I feel like it is well secured, I will just tie that up. Now I'm going to cut the bottom loops and then just sort of give it all a nice haircut. I cut the ends to equal length, and then I'm just going to string 3 beads. I have these black beads. I actually disassembled another set of string beads that we had and decided to use the black beads to hang over. Once I have them strung on, then I go ahead and attach them to the top of the spindle. You don't need this step, but I kind of liked the little bit of extra decoration. And of course, beads are super popular this year. Okay, so let me know, what do you think? How do you like this project? Pretty great from those spindles on that chair, and I have so many more projects to do. Again, I just love the drop shadow effect of stenciling. I think it really it really has a significant impact over just plain stenciling. And what do you think about the beads? Do you like them? Let me know in the comments. Next up, I'm going to start off with this JRV wood blank. And for this project, I'm going to use mostly all fusion. I will leave the colors in the description below. I love this soft French blue. It is such a pretty color, but I'm going to do a lot of painting over it. So I am not worrying a whole lot about getting all the sides perfect on this or the top. I'm only using one coat. And then I'm going to use a wax puck, which is actually by Miss Mustard Seed. And I am going to basically add some pretty heavy waxy areas over here. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the top layers not to stick as well to those areas. When I'm done sanding, I want to be able to see this blue underneath. And I have 2 more colors to add on here. So I'm just giving them some areas, maybe some wear areas around the outsides, a nice heavy wax. And you can kind of see it as I move the board. You can see it how it glimmers or glistens on the side. And because I'm going to use a heat gun in this project, it's not going to work exactly as intended, but you'll see it still does make a big difference. So after I've applied the wax, I am going to use, I believe this is buttercream, buttercream, buttermilk, something like that by Fusion. Again, I'm using all Fusion. And on this, I'm only going to add 1 coat again. And on the sides, I am just going to kind of do a sort of washy coat. Like I'm going to allow the blue to be seen under this because I didn't really add any wax to the sides. Next up, I'm going to try Dixie Belle's Crackle. This is the first time I've used it. I have Fusion Crackle also, but I'm going to be honest, I have a real hard time working with it and getting it to do exactly what I want it to. So I thought I would try this first. I read the instructions and it says to mix thoroughly before you use it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm making sure it is well mixed. And then the next step is to brush it on without overworking it and let it dry completely. Now, I've used Crackle products before, and one of the things universally true is the thicker the crackle is, the thicker your cracks will be. So I am making sure that I use a fair amount of product and that I do not overwork it. I only want to go over the stroke a couple of times, and I also know that the way you lay this is going to make a difference. So there's a couple times I forget about the way my strokes are and I don't completely go in the same direction, but I'm trying to remember for the most part to do that. And then again, you're supposed to let it dry. Now, y'all know me, right? So before I move on, I took my camera down and I wanted to show you just kind of how thick it is. Hopefully you can get an idea. It's thick, it's glossy, and it's got some bubbles in it, and I'm just letting it dry that way. You can already see it's starting to tighten up a little. Now, remember I said you're supposed to let it dry? Well, knowing me, I don't have time for that. Who has time for that? So I took a heat gun and sped up the process, and this is what it looks like. Now, I know this is scary, and yeah. And it's still actually a little bit damp in areas. So, you know, what's the harm in taking the heat gun and finishing the drying process? Well, the Fusion with its built-in top coat, especially over raw wood, does tend to bubble a little bit. So I got a little more distressing than I had originally planned. But I'm going to be honest, I love it. And I'll also say this Crackle is meant to use over chalk paint and not Fusion. So it does respond a little bit differently. But I'm going to tell you, wait till you see the end result. I absolutely love it. So after your Crackle medium is dry, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the Fusion Limestone that I used on the other projects. And I am going to paint it on. Now, I've got to say that this once again says not to overwork it. You're supposed to have a couple nice clean strokes and not go back and forth. And the other thing you're not supposed to do is you're not supposed to change directions. So you'll see on sort of the chest of this little sheep, I go in a different direction and you will see it in the Crackle. Yeah, and then in the little feet too. So right there is where I'm doing it. And you will see how it affects the Crackle in the end. By the way, this is going to be one solid coat. I sort of crack myself up here. Watch my fingers on my right hand as I'm waiting for this crackle to, crackle. I left the camera rolling because I wanted you to see it kind of in real time, but you really couldn't. But you can just see the impatience while I'm waiting for this to dry because I'm not supposed to use the heat gun at this point. So I let that dry for probably about 15 minutes and then, yep, I got the heat gun out. And look at all this crazy, bubbly, cracky goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay, there you can see where I did the downward stroke and on the legs, and you can definitely see the way the cracks are different. I kind of love it as it is. And then I took my orbital sander, and this might have been a little bit of a mistake. I haven't let everything dry as long as I should have, so it did end up pulling off the fusion a little more than I had originally intended. But once again, I love rustic, so I'm very pleased with the way it came out. But if I were cautioning somebody who was trying this at home, I would probably tell you to let it dry for several hours so that crackle, which is really thick and goopy, really has a chance to dry all the way. And again, this is made for chalk paint, not fusion. So you can kind of see it was coming off a little bit in sheets, and I went with it and was happy about it, but I think not everybody would be. And here where you can really see the blue underneath, that was one of those areas that I had used the wax puck. And I think because I used the heat gun so much on this, that the wax did melt a little and didn't work quite as well as it typically does when I'm doing this. And again, I think that crackle medium, which isn't made for fusion, it's made for chalk paint, sort of changed that dynamic a little bit. But watch after I put the wax on, all of this grainy grittiness is so pretty. With spring and Easter right around the corner, I thought the sweet lamb transfers were the perfect accent to this, and this is what I had planned on using from the beginning and what I kind of was matching some of my colors around the theme of it. And this is the sheep I want to use right here. There in these packs, there are 3 different sheets and the stick, and I tell you, I love these. Sometimes I like these little ones way better than the big ones just because I find there's so much good use for them. I was very concerned when I was doing this that the plastic would stick or the stencil would pull up more of the paint versus the transfer actually sticking to the project. But you see it stuck really well. And here I'm about ready to put some more dark wax on there. And then as I touch it, I realize, no. This is not the order of operations. If I use this dark wax first, I'm going to end up with a really dark piece. I need to clear wax my piece before I add the dark wax. And this will keep it from, especially with all this texture, this will keep it from ending up as a dirty looking mess. I want it to look vintage. I want it to get in all those cracks and crevices, but I don't want it to look dirty, if you will. So a nice coat of clear wax is the answer. And I go ahead and do this on all the different sides. There we go. Now I can use the best dang wax and give it the antiquing that I want it to. Remember, I put in this crackle and the underneath layers to give it a nice surface for this wax to grab onto, so I would really have a lot of interest nooks and crannies. And you could already see all that detail coming to life. So what do you think? Do you hate the fact that it peeled off in those areas, or does it lend itself to being even older looking because of those peeling layers? I just love all of the texture, all of the details. Everything to me just is fantastic. This was a really fun piece to do, and I love how it came out. I'm definitely going to be making some more of these before our next big event. I would love to hear what you have to think about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I hope you enjoyed the projects. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have a business doing DIY, then you want to be sure to check out CreativeCon.LIVE and see this upcoming conference that we have with some amazing speakers. I think you'll be blown away. We've already started selling tickets and we have a limited number of seating. So be sure to go check it out at CreativeCon.LIVE. Also, if you haven't seen our Facebook group yet, be sure to join us over at Creating the Hive on Facebook. Look for the group, not the page. It's a big difference. Bye, guys.